I sat in my lawyer's office staring at the stack of papers that proved my innocence. 2 years with Jessica. 2 years of building what I thought would be our future together. But now, the woman I loved was asking me to forget that her 17-year-old daughter had tried to destroy my life with a lie. A lie that nearly cost me my job, my reputation, and could have put me behind bars. As I held those documents in my hands, I kept asking myself the same question over and over: is love worth forgiving the unforgivable? Before I tell you how a 17-year-old nearly destroyed everything I built, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens next will show you how far someone will go to protect a lie, and how hard it is to choose between love and justice. I met Jessica at a community center volunteer event 2 years ago. It was one of those Saturday mornings where you show up thinking you will just pack some boxes and leave, but instead you end up meeting someone who changes everything. She was a nurse, 38 years old, with this warm smile that made you feel like you had known her forever. We started talking while sorting donations, and before I knew it, we had exchanged numbers. Jessica was a widow. Her husband had passed away 3 years earlier from a heart attack, leaving her to raise their daughter, Paige, alone. She talked about him sometimes, always with respect, never with bitterness. I admired that about her. She was strong, independent, and had this quiet grace about her that drew me in. Our relationship developed naturally. We went on dates, grabbed dinner after her shifts at the hospital, took walks through the park on Sunday afternoons. I was 32, working as a software engineer at a tech company downtown. My life was stable, predictable, maybe a little boring until Jessica came along. She brought color into my world. After 6 months of dating, Jessica decided it was time for me to meet Paige. I remember feeling nervous, like I was about to take some kind of test I had not studied for. Paige was 15 then, quiet and reserved. She did not say much during our first meeting at a pizza place Jessica had picked out. She answered my questions with short responses, barely made eye contact, and spent most of the time looking at her phone. Jessica assured me later that Paige just needed time. Losing her father had been hard on her, and having a new man in her mother's life was an adjustment. I understood that. I was not trying to replace her dad. I just wanted to be someone she could feel comfortable around, someone who respected her space and her grief. Over the next few months, I made an effort. I asked about her school, bought her books I thought she might like, tried to find common ground. Paige was always polite but distant. She would thank me for the gifts, answer my questions, but there was this wall between us that I could not seem to break through. Jessica said it was normal that teenagers were just moody, and I should not take it personally. A year into our relationship, I moved in with Jessica and Paige. It felt like the natural next step. We were spending most nights together anyway, and it made financial sense too. The first few weeks were good. We had family dinners, watched movies on weekends, settled into a routine that felt comfortable. I made sure to respect Paige's space. I never went into her room without permission, never pushed her to talk to me if she did not want to. I figured that with time she would warm up to me. But then things started to shift. Small things at first. Paige would leave the room whenever I entered. If I walked into the kitchen, she would grab whatever she needed and disappear upstairs. When I asked about her homework or how school was going, she would give me one-word answers and then close her bedroom door. Jessica noticed it too, but she kept saying the same thing: teenagers are moody. Give her time. I tried not to let it bother me. I focused on my work on my relationship with Jessica, on building the life we talked about having together. But there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something was not right. I could not put my finger on it, but Paige's behavior was becoming more than just typical teenage attitude. It felt deliberate, like she was actively trying to avoid me. One evening in September, I came home early from work. A project meeting had been canceled, so I left the office around 4 in the afternoon instead of my usual 6:30. When I walked in, Paige was on the phone in the living room talking to a friend. The moment she saw me, she stopped mid-sentence. She looked at me with this expression I had never seen before, something between fear and anger, and then quickly went upstairs and locked herself in her room. I stood there in the living room, confused and uncomfortable. What had I done? I replayed the moment in my head, trying to figure out if I had said something, done something, anything that would explain that look. But I came up empty. I had just walked through the door, said hello, and she bolted. Over the next few weeks, Paige's avoidance escalated. She stopped coming down for dinner when I was home. She told Jessica she wanted to spend weekends at her grandmother's house, something she had never asked to do before. She would not look at me, would not respond when I said good morning, or asked if she needed anything. The tension in the house became thick enough to cut with a knife. Jessica finally confronted me one night after Paige had refused to come down for dinner again. She asked if something had happened between us, if I had said or done anything that might have upset her daughter. I told her the truth. I had no idea what was going on. I had been nothing but respectful, nothing but careful to give Paige the space she needed. Jessica believed me, or at least she said she did. She promised to talk to Paige to find out what was really bothering her. But the conversation never seemed to happen, or if it did, Jessica never told me what came of it. The atmosphere in the house grew heavier with each passing day. I started to dread coming home, wondering what new way Paige would find to make me feel unwelcome in what was supposed to be our home. Then came the Friday night that changed everything. Jessica was working the night shift at the hospital, something she did twice a week. I was home working in the small office we had set up in one of the spare bedrooms. I had a deadline approaching and needed to focus, so I barely left that room all evening. Around 10 o'clock, I went downstairs to make coffee. I needed the caffeine to push through another few hours of coding. Paige was in the kitchen getting a glass of water. I said hello, asked if she needed anything. She did not respond. She just filled her glass and turned to leave. I had reached my limit. The silence, the avoidance, the constant tension, it was all too much. I decided right then that we needed to talk, that I needed to understand what was happening. I called her name. She stopped, but did not turn around. I kept my voice calm, non-threatening. I told her that if I had done something to upset her, I wanted to know what it was. I explained that I never wanted to replace her father, that I just wanted us to be able to get along, to coexist peacefully in the same house. I thought maybe, if I put it out there, if I showed her I was willing to listen, we could finally break through whatever this was. Paige slowly turned around. She looked at me with these cold eyes that held something I could not quite identify. Then she said 5 words that made my blood run cold. You should stay away from me. Before I could respond, before I could ask her what she meant, she walked upstairs and slammed her bedroom door. The sound echoed through the empty house. I stood in the kitchen, completely stunned, my mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. What did she mean? Stay away from her? I had been staying away from her. I had given her nothing but space. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying the conversation, her words, the look in her eyes. Something was very wrong, but I had no idea what it was or how to fix it. The next morning, Saturday, I woke up to find Jessica sitting on the couch, her face pale and her hands shaking. She had gotten home from her shift an hour earlier and had gone straight to Paige's room. I asked her what was wrong. She just stared at me for a moment before saying she had received a call from Paige's school counselor. Apparently, Paige had reached out to the counselor on Friday afternoon, telling her that she felt uncomfortable at home. She had not given details, just said she did not feel safe and wanted to know if she could stay with a friend for a while. The counselor had called Jessica, immediately concerned about what might be happening. Jessica had spent the last hour in Paige's room trying to get her to explain what was going on. Paige had cried, told her mother she was scared, but refused to say anything more. Jessica asked me directly, had I said something to Paige the night before. I told her exactly what happened. The conversation in the kitchen, how I had tried to reach out what Paige had said to me. Jessica listened, her expression unreadable. She said she would keep trying to get Paige to talk. I offered to give them space to go out for a few hours so they could have privacy. Jessica agreed. I spent the afternoon driving around, stopping at a coffee shop trying to distract myself. But my mind kept circling back to Paige, to her words, to the fear in Jessica's eyes. When I returned home that evening, I knew immediately that something had shifted. Jessica was waiting for me in the living room. Her face was blotchy from crying, her eyes red and swollen. She asked me to sit down. My heart started pounding. I had this terrible feeling that whatever was about to happen would change everything. She told me that Paige had finally opened up to her, that after hours of gentle prodding of promises that she was safe, Paige had confessed what had been bothering her. And what she confessed made me feel like the ground had opened up beneath me. According to Paige, I had been making her uncomfortable for months. She claimed I stared at her when she wore her pajamas around the house, that I would stand outside the bathroom door when she was showering, that one night when Jessica was at work, I had knocked on her bedroom door at midnight, asking if she was scared, if she wanted to come downstairs and watch a movie with me. And the night before, in the kitchen, she said I had told her she was growing into a beautiful young woman. None of it was true. Not one single word. I stood up, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I told Jessica that Paige was lying, that none of those things had happened. I had never said those words, never knocked on her door at night, never done anything inappropriate. Jessica was crying harder now, asking me why Paige would make something like this up. I had no answer. I was so shocked, so blindsided by the accusations that I could barely form coherent thoughts. All I could do was repeat that it was not true, that I had done nothing wrong. Jessica shook her head. She said Paige was her daughter, that she would not lie about something this serious. I could see it in her eyes. She believed Paige. Despite 2 years together, despite knowing me, loving me, she believed her daughter over me. She asked me to leave to stay somewhere else for a few days, while she figured things out. I did not argue. What was the point? I packed a bag, grabbed my laptop, and walked out of the house in a state of complete shock. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel as I drove to a nearby hotel. The next 2 days were a blur. I checked into a hotel room and tried calling Jessica multiple times. She never answered. I left messages, sent texts, begging her to talk to me, to let me explain. Nothing. Radio silence. On Monday morning, I received an email from Human Resources at my company. Someone had filed an anonymous report claiming I had engaged in inappropriate behavior with a minor. The company was suspending me with pay pending an investigation. I sat on the hotel bed, staring at my phone, feeling my entire world crumble around me. I knew who had filed that report, or at least I knew who had prompted it. I called Jessica again. This time she answered. I asked her directly if she had reported me to my company. She said no, but admitted she had told her sister about Paige's accusations. Her sister, in her effort to protect Paige, had likely made the call. Jessica's voice was cold, distant. When I protested my innocence again, she cut me off. She said Paige was terrified that she needed to focus on her daughter right now. I called my best friend Marcus and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he gave me the best advice I would receive through this whole nightmare: hire a lawyer immediately. I found a defense attorney who specialized in false accusations. Her name was Patricia, and she had seen cases like mine before. She told me that my situation was serious, that false accusations involving minors could destroy lives even when they were proven untrue. She also told me we needed evidence, lots of it, and fast. While I was dealing with my lawyer, the rumors started spreading. Neighbors who had always been friendly suddenly avoided eye contact. Someone I had considered a friend unfriended me on social media. The looks I got when I went to the grocery store made me feel like a criminal, even though I had done nothing wrong. 3 days after the accusation, 2 police officers showed up at my hotel room. They said they needed to talk to me about a complaint filed by a minor. My lawyer had warned me this might happen. I told them I would be happy to speak with them, but only with my attorney present. We arranged to meet at the police station the next morning. Sitting in that interrogation room was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. The detective asked me about my relationship with Paige, about my interactions with her, about whether I had ever been alone with her. I answered every question honestly and directly. I told them I had always respected her boundaries, that our interactions were minimal, and always in common areas of the house that I had gone out of my way to give her space. The detective asked if I had ever entered her room. I explained that I had once to fix her laptop when Jessica asked me to help. Paige had been at school at the time. Had I ever commented on her appearance? Never. I barely spoke to her at all. My lawyer kept reminding the detective that accusations were not evidence. The detective said they were investigating and advised me not to leave the city. As we left the station, Patricia told me we needed to find proof of my innocence, because in cases like this, the burden of proof seemed to fall on the accused rather than the accuser. That night, lying in the hotel room, I went over every interaction I had ever had with Paige. And then I remembered something: the security cameras. Jessica had installed cameras at the front door and in the hallway after a break-in had occurred in our neighborhood the year before. The cameras recorded movement inside the house from 6 in the evening until 7 in the morning. If Paige was telling the truth, those cameras would have caught me doing what she claimed. But if I was innocent, the cameras would prove it. I called Jessica and asked for access to the security camera footage. I told her that if I had done what Paige accused me of, it would be on camera. If I was innocent, the footage would prove that too. Jessica hesitated, said she would think about it. I did not wait for her answer. I knew Jessica stored all the camera footage on a cloud service. I still had access because she had given me the password months ago, so I could check the cameras when she was at work and I was traveling. It felt like a violation to access them without her explicit permission now, but I was fighting for my life. I downloaded 3 months' worth of footage. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. I watched hour after hour of video making notes, taking screenshots, building my case. The footage was damning, but not for me. It proved everything I had been saying. The night Paige claimed I knocked on her bedroom door at midnight, the camera showed me in the downstairs office the entire night. I never went upstairs. Every time I went to the kitchen or living room, the footage showed Paige actively avoiding me leaving rooms when I entered them. There was no lurking, no staring, no inappropriate behavior. Just a man living in his own home being avoided by a teenager. I gave everything to Patricia. She reviewed the footage carefully and agreed it was strong evidence. But she said we needed something that spoke to Paige's credibility or her motivation for making these accusations. That is when I remembered Marcus. His daughter went to the same school as Paige. I asked him if he could help me reach out to any of Paige's friends to see if anyone knew anything that might help my case. Marcus was hesitant at first. Approaching teenagers about something like this felt wrong, but he understood what was at stake. He talked to his daughter, who agreed to carefully reach out to Paige's best friend, a girl named Zoe. A week later, Marcus called me. Zoe wanted to talk, but she was scared. She did not want to get Paige in trouble, but she also felt guilty about what was happening to me. Marcus arranged for us to meet at his house with his daughter present, so Zoe would feel more comfortable. Zoe was 16, soft-spoken, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. But once she started talking, everything began to make sense. She told us that Paige had confided in her months ago, saying she hated that her mom had a boyfriend. Paige wanted it to be just her and her mother again, the way it was before I came into their lives. Paige resented the time Jessica spent with me, resented having to share her mother's attention. About 2 weeks before she made her accusations, Paige had told Zoe something chilling. I found a way to make him leave. Zoe did not understand what Paige meant at the time, but now, hearing about the accusations, she realized what her friend had done. Zoe agreed to give a statement which Patricia recorded and documented. Now I had video evidence and witness testimony. It was time to end this nightmare. Patricia contacted the detective handling my case and requested a meeting. She presented the security camera footage walking them through each accusation Paige had made and showing how the video contradicted every single claim. Then she played Zoe's recorded statement. The detective watched everything in silence. When it was over, he looked at me and said they would need to bring Paige and Jessica back in for questioning. I felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that the truth was finally coming out, dread about what this confrontation would mean for everyone involved. 2 days later, we all met at the police station. Jessica, Paige, the detective, Patricia, and me all crammed into a small interrogation room. The detective started by showing the video footage. He played the segment from the night Paige claimed I knocked on her door. The timestamp clearly showed me in the downstairs office working on my laptop. I never went upstairs. Paige's face went white. Jessica looked from the screen to her daughter, confusion and horror mixing in her expression. The detective continued showing more footage demonstrating how every single accusation Paige had made was contradicted by the video evidence. Then he read Zoe's statement aloud. When he got to the part where Paige had said she found a way to make me leave, Jessica let out a small gasp. She turned to her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "Paige, is this true?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Paige did not answer at first. She just sat there trembling, her hands gripped tightly together in her lap. The detective asked her again to explain the discrepancies between her story and the evidence. That is when she broke. Paige started sobbing, the kind of crying that shakes your whole body. Through her tears, she choked out the words I had been waiting to hear. I just wanted him gone, Mom. I wanted you back. I wanted it to be just us again, like it was before." The room fell silent except for Paige's crying. Jessica reached for her daughter, but Paige pulled away. The detective explained that given the evidence and Paige's admission, all charges against me would be dropped. He also warned that making false accusations was a serious matter, especially when it involved law enforcement resources, and could have resulted in criminal charges against an innocent person. Patricia and I left the station shortly after. She told me she would contact my employer with the evidence that my suspension would be lifted. She was right. Within 2 days, I was cleared to return to work, and HR sent out a memo stating that the investigation had concluded with no findings of misconduct. But clearing my name professionally did not heal the damage that had been done. My reputation in the neighborhood was still tarnished. Friends who had distanced themselves did not immediately come back. The whispers did not stop just because I was innocent. Once an accusation like that is made, some people never fully let it go. A week after everything came to light, Jessica called me. She asked if we could meet at a coffee shop near the house. I agreed, though part of me wanted to refuse, wanted to never see her again. But another part, the part that had loved her for 2 years, needed closure. She looked terrible when I arrived. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, hands wrapped around a coffee cup she had not touched. She apologized immediately before I even sat down. She said she was sorry for not believing me for letting her daughter's lies nearly destroy my life. She told me Paige was now seeing a therapist, that they were working through her grief and her feelings about me. Then she asked me to come home. She said she loved me, that she knew we could work through this together. She reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled away. I asked her if Paige had apologized to me. Jessica said Paige was too ashamed, but that she understood what she had done was wrong. I asked what consequences Paige was facing. Jessica said she was grounded and going to therapy, but she emphasized that Paige was just a child who was hurting. That is when I felt the anger I had been holding back finally break through. I looked at Jessica, at this woman I had planned a future with, and I said the words that had been building inside me since this whole nightmare started. She nearly destroyed my life, Jessica. Do you understand that she did not just tell a little lie? She tried to send me to prison. She tried to ruin my career, my reputation, everything I have worked for. And you want me to just forget it. Jessica started crying again. She said she understood I was hurt, but that Paige was her daughter. She had to protect her. I understood that I really did, but I also had to protect myself. I told Jessica that I could not be with someone who would always choose their child over the truth. That, when it came down to it, when she had to decide who to believe, she had chosen Paige without question. Even though she knew me, knew my character, knew how careful I had always been around her daughter, she had still believed the worst of me. I forgive Paige, I said. She is young. She was confused and hurting. I understand that, but I cannot forget what happened. I cannot pretend it did not happen, and I cannot go back to that house and live under the same roof as someone who tried to put me in jail. Jessica begged me to reconsider, told me she would do anything to make it right. But there was nothing she could do. The trust was broken not just with Paige, but with her too. I stood up, told her I hoped she and Paige would both find healing, and walked away. I did not look back. The months that followed were difficult. I threw myself into work, spending long hours at the office rebuilding the professional relationships that had been damaged. Some of my co-workers never looked at me quite the same way even after they knew the truth. That hurt, but I learned to accept it. Marcus remained a steady friend through it all. He invited me to family dinners, included me in weekend activities, made sure I did not isolate myself. Through him, I found a support group for people who had been falsely accused of crimes. Hearing other people's stories, understanding that I was not alone in this experience, helped more than I expected. I also started seeing a therapist. I needed help processing what had happened, help learning to trust people again. The false accusation had shaken something fundamental in me. If someone I barely knew could lie so convincingly about me, how could I ever trust anyone again? My therapist helped me work through those fears, helped me understand that Paige's actions were not a reflection of all people, just of one hurt teenager who made a terrible choice. Slowly, very slowly, I started to feel like myself again. I went on a few dates, though I found myself being overly cautious, keeping people at arm's length. I was not ready for anything serious, and maybe I would not be for a long time. That was okay. I had learned that sometimes protecting yourself is more important than opening yourself up to love. I never heard from Paige directly. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she had done beyond that moment in the police station. Part of me wanted that closure, wanted to hear her say she was sorry directly to me. But I also understood that maybe that would never happen, and I had to find peace with that. Jessica reached out a few more times over the months. Texts asking how I was doing, calls. I did not answer an email on my birthday. I never responded. What would be the point? We could never go back to what we had. Too much had been broken. I did not hate Paige. I genuinely hoped she got the help she needed, that she learned from this mistake and grew into a better person. She was a child who had lost her father, who was struggling with her mother moving on. I understood the psychology of it, even if I could not forgive the action itself. What I learned through this whole experience was something I never expected to learn, that some things are unforgivable, and that is okay. We are taught to forgive, to move past hurt, to let go of anger. But sometimes, holding on to your own dignity, refusing to accept being wronged, is the healthier choice. I also learned that love is not enough. I loved Jessica. Maybe I still do in some way. But love without trust is just an empty word. And once that trust is broken, especially in such a fundamental way, it cannot be repaired with apologies and promises. I am still rebuilding. Some days are harder than others. Sometimes I see a father and a daughter out together, and I feel this pang of sadness for what could have been. But mostly I feel free. Free from the tension that had been building in that house for months. Free from walking on eggshells. Free from wondering if I was welcome in my own home. I've learned to love myself enough to walk away from situations that diminish me, even when walking away means losing something I thought I wanted. Sometimes the hardest choice is not between right and wrong, but between what you love and what you deserve. Looking back now, sitting in my own apartment with no one questioning my presence or my motives, I know I made the right choice. Paige may have tried to destroy my life with her lie, but in a strange way she freed me from a situation that was never going to work. I deserve someone who believes in me, who trusts me, who would fight for me the way I would fight for them. Jessica was not that person, and that is okay. We are both better off moving forward separately. So, would you have gone back if someone you loved asked you to forgive their child for trying to destroy your life? Could you do it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story made you think about the importance of standing up for yourself and knowing when to walk away, hit that like button. Subscribe for more real-life stories about tough choices and hard truths. Share this with someone who needs to hear that protecting yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you all the strength to make the hard choices when your own moment comes. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and remember that you deserve to be believed.